the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the Brock v. Mac Legendary Rivals podcast, and I am not sitting with Wayne Groh from the movie Heat, you know, the kind of seedy criminal that sets everything in motion. It's Steve Groh, and that is way better than Wayne Groh. Steve, of your McMaster Marauders, how are you?
I'm doing well. I don't think I qualify as a seedy criminal at this stage, so it's one half step up. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Wow.
I forgot about Wayne Groh. There was an Al Groh who coached West Virginia football, I think, too, and so I don't think he was that popular either. So
no, Al Groh was, I think, a Bill Parcells guy, right?
Yeah. I think he ended up with the Jets at one point. Anyway,
yeah.
the name carries a lot of baggage with it, apparently. So.
Well, we'll get time to work on the seedy criminal part. Steve, why don't we just, look, you and I float in some very similar circles. So why don't we get everyone caught up with what you're doing today and where you're living, and for those people who haven't seen you in a while.
Sure. Yeah. So for about the past, I guess, sadly, 25 years, I've been living in Toronto in the West End I now live in the West End, Toronto. Been working in, I guess, where our paths do cross over is I work at an ad agency. I've been in advertising for about 20 years now. As I said, I live in the West End. I have two boys who are 16 and 14 and keep me on my toes and in my car driving to various basketball courts and baseball diamonds around the city. And I think that's about it.
Well, given the traffic in the West End of the city, that's enough to add years to your life. But we'll get into the trials and tribulations of the advertising business and how it's changed in 20 years. I'm sure that'll be tons of fun. I had hair when I entered it, so that'll tell you everything you need to know. But, a couple of kids, and are you involved in coaching as well as driving and being an ATM at this point?
Yeah, driving, ATM, all that jazz. But I'm lucky enough, my brother also lives in the West End, and he has a 2007 boy, as do I, and a 2010 boy, as do I. So we managed to coach both of their basketball teams, the rep basketball teams for the Etobicoke Thunder. We did that until our younger guys were just finishing up grade 8. So this was kind of our swan song this year. And then my older guy had never had a single lick of interest in baseball, and neither did my younger guy until about 2 years ago, sort of during COVID. When there was nothing to do, I used to go throw batting practice to him in the schoolyard because there was nothing to do. And he sort of took to it at that point, and then picked it up last year, and he's playing now for Bloordale. And so I coach there. I got roped into coaching there. And so it's finally I can add some value. I don't know how much value I add on a basketball court, but I can finally add some experience from on a baseball diamond. So
I don't want to say there's anything creepy about you and your brother having kids at the exact same year, but that sounds
There's a joke
really
that he makes, but I won't. But I'll keep it clean on this family podcast. Yeah.
Amazing, Steve. So why don't we start? That sounds fun and interesting. As most people, we tend to lose track of some of our teammates, and they take an intense interest in where we are today. But they also don't really understand. Sometimes, when you're on a ball team and you're in the moment, you're talking about which girl was hotter at the Rat or what have you.
None.
Sometimes it's a little bit about they don't understand the story prior to you coming to McMaster. So why don't we
Yeah.
start there with, you growing up, and obviously you have a brother in the mix. So
Yeah.
where did you grow up, and how did you kind of make your way into sports and such?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up until grade 7. We lived in North Toronto, and baseball was limited pretty much to Lawrence Park Athletic Association, which probably involved getting a very cardboardy hat and playing in jeans, most likely. It was sort of more of a community fun team thing. You probably got a hat and a T-shirt, and that was that. In grade 7, we moved to Ottawa, and I took, I think, a passing interest. I was more into hockey. I took a passing interest in baseball, and then I wasn't a big kid. In the first year of contact hockey, I managed to collect 3 concussions, at which point, and I was not a particularly magical hockey player, and the doctor sort of said, maybe you don't want to do this anymore. You can play house league, and that's it. So my interests, although albeit it's a summer and a winter thing, my interest definitely shifted more to baseball. So around probably grade 9, grade 10, I started playing baseball more in earnest for a gentleman named Carl Faulkner, who in the Ottawa area is baseball royalty. He was a coach forever. I think he now has a field named after him. He just passed in his 90s. He just passed away a couple of years ago. But anyone involved in Ottawa baseball would likely know that name, certainly from when I was there. So I played there until the end of high school and sort of thought that was that. There were some summer traveling teams in Ottawa when I was back from university, but that never really jived with having to work and save up money for school. And I wasn't a particularly stellar baseball player, so it wasn't in the cards. And then, in my final year at Mac, a friend happened to walk through Ivor Wynn and saw probably an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper advertising tryouts for the school baseball team. And he mentioned it to me, and the two of us went out, and I managed to somehow catch on. I don't think they were throwing batting practice hard enough that day, so I probably didn't look as incompetent with my bat as I was at that point with a 3 or 4 year. I mean, I wasn't starting from a good place at the end of high school, and it certainly didn't get better. From a lot of summer slow pitch, I had a pretty big hitch in my swing by then. But and I was a pretty decent fielder, so I probably showed all right at the tryouts and managed to make the team, which was to me amazing. I thought sort of my baseball time was done, and this allowed me one more chance at what turned out to be just so much fun and a highlight of, albeit a 2 or 3 month season, it was just a highlight of my time at McMaster.
It's super cool, and we'll get into that shortly. When you were going to school in Ottawa, what led to McMaster being one of your choices?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because back then it was sort of from Ottawa. It was a lot of people stayed at Ottawa or Carleton. It was, and then the big ones were Queens, Western, McGill, probably as they probably are now. I think from our entire high school, 3 people went to Mac. I don't know. I had a friend whose older brother went there. He had said good things about it. Went and visited. I liked it. That's where I ended up deciding to go. My brother ended up following my footsteps, because I think he came down in high school and probably was shown a pretty fun time with fake ID, whatever, and probably thought it was the greatest place on earth just because of the university experience. So he followed
for sure. What do you remember? What you took? Do you remember what you were taking in terms of what path you wanted for your career?
I didn't. I had no clue, and I think that's funny. I think a decent. I mean, there was grade 13 back then, so I wonder with my guys who are only going to grade 12. I don't know. It was just the thing that everyone did from my school, and so I ended up in social studies and ended up taking geography and history, which I don't know if it's as far away from advertising as you can get, but it's pretty close. It's just I ended up there, and scholastically never really kind of figured out what path I wanted to go on, but certainly I loved my time at Mac and thought it was a great school, and it was a lot of fun. And then from there, I graduated at Mac. I went and taught English in South Korea for 2.5 years, trying to figure out what to do. I decided I didn't want to be a teacher. I ended up back in Toronto, and then sort of fell into advertising.
It sounds like it's been kind of a fun, figure it out as you go journey. There's
probably some other guys on this who've had probably a straighter line figured out from high school onwards. That's for sure.
I think everyone takes at least one good left turn, from that perspective. But So when you first went to Mac, were you in residence in first year? And do you recall which one you were
I
in?
lived off campus at first,
Yeah.
and then at Christmas, I think my marks probably got me into off campus at first, and then in January, Hedden, which would now be 35 years old, Hedden Hall opened up, so there were spots, and I ended up living there, and then just after that, Brandon, which had been all female forever, Brandon Hall ended up. Becoming co-ed, and so I moved over there as a floor rep or a don or whatever you want to call it, and then from there lived off campus with a bunch of buddies, none of whom were baseball players again because that just didn't exist. Actually, funny enough, in my second year, I ran into a guy who pulled together a baseball team, and I can't remember his name. I was trying to think about it the other days. I think it was Mike, but I can't remember. And we ended up driving to Guelph and playing a really weird exhibition game. But I was desperate for any baseball at that point. And that was the extent of it. And it never really got, and I think he was in his last year, so that never really got anywhere. But then Jay Gwendon, who I've heard mentioned on this podcast numerous times, he pulled it together and got that 94 team together, thankfully.
Yeah, that's and that team's full of characters. So, I get the pleasure of meeting a few of you up close and seeing that the character part hasn't dwindled with time.
No.
So tell me a little bit.
Of them look the same, and they definitely act the same.
So, what are your memories of the, making the team? Obviously you go out because you've got a flyer there, and were you confident you were going to make the team, or was it just
no? I mean, as I said, I was a middle infielder, so I had a pretty decent glove. We ended up with middle infielders who were better than I was. I didn't play in the middle infield eventually, but I had a pretty good glove, and once guys in game situations, my bat was so messed by the time I got into games. But at batting practice, where someone's just throwing flat and straight, and you kind of know where it's coming, I showed all right there. Wasn't sure if I'd make it or not. There were probably, if memory serves, I don't know, 35, 40 guys. It was at a school. At a park right across from where St. Mary's High School is now. Just a big, I think it had one baseball diamond. And it was there. And it was it was not, the theme, in talking with guys recently, because everyone's sort of been chatting a fair bit recently, the theme wasn't the most organized thing, but it's also amazingly organized for however old Jay and Billy were at 22, 23. It was, or maybe younger. It was amazingly organized for that level, but it certainly wasn't the way tryouts are now or anything like that, for sure.
Yeah, and so you guys, in '94, did you guys, when you made the team, did you have was it the blue uniforms that you had to wear in '94?
I have it upstairs, number 7. It's you could probably sneeze through it, or no, actually, no, it's quite the opposite. Now that I think about it, it was pretty heavy. It was not the material that they have now, but. Yeah, I think I heard I didn't know this story, but I think when Bill talked to you, he mentioned that we weren't allowed to use the school colors. I didn't know that was the reason, but I knew we weren't maroon and gray or whatever our colors were. We were blue and off white, I guess. Yes. So we have the heavy blue flannel baseball jerseys with gray baseball pants and a hat with a white M on it. So they didn't look as sharp as the guys do now. That's for sure. But I thought it was the greatest thing ever. That's why it's still up in my closet.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you classify the team, like, was the team better than you thought it was going to be when you've got Billy who, is pretty accomplished, and, we talked a little bit about Trevor Lawson and some of the other folks. Yeah. How did you feel about the quality of the team? And you guys had only 3 opponents really at that point. Yeah. It would have been Guelph, Durham College, and McGill. Yeah. And we'll touch on all of them a little bit. But what did you feel about the quality of the team?
Yeah, I think probably around the periphery versus where I probably lived, it was guys who could play base. Versus the general population were good baseball players, but, in the grand scheme of things, maybe weren't exceptional. But then you had, as you said, Billy was an amazing catcher. Trevor was an amazing infielder. Steve McGrail. Shane Toohey was a great pitcher. Joe Davis was amazing. Rob Pino was amazing. There was a guy, Jason Brooks. I think Billy mentioned him. He had spent time in Florida with, I think, the Red Sox organization, maybe the Expos organization. So he had some pretty legitimate guys. I think I think Hamilton's a pretty athletic city, and I think where Mac sort of probably won a little bit was guys returning from stints in the U.S. who decided they'd just go to McMaster, and so you had these, just these guys who logically went to Mac, whether it was from Mississauga or Hamilton or wherever, who were just really. I mean, some of these guys to me, were amazing baseball players. So we could, and then. I mean, I guess we'll get into each team, but the other teams, two of the other three teams had some pretty stellar baseball players as well, if I recall.
Yeah, I'll take a wild guess and say that the third team in that mix is probably Guelph.
Yeah, that might be it. I'm sure they've gotten better over the years. But
so here's a ridiculous thing that came out, that's going to come out in a podcast. The Guelph team was so ridiculously hurting for players that they recruited a guy who ended up making the Brock team in 1995 as ostensibly the starting catcher. But he wasn't even in university. He wasn't attending the university. His girlfriend was in the residence at Guelph, and they found out he could play, and they recruited him onto the team.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So he played as a high school player for the University of Guelph Griffins. So
that doesn't shock me. That doesn't shock me. I actually hit all right against Guelph, which is, those two things make perfect sense. But
well, Nate probably just didn't call the right pitch.
Yeah, that's it.
Tell me a little bit about, you guys had, in that first year at least, a pretty intense rivalry with Durham College. And it was a little bit of a, tale of two cities, right? They would come rolling in on the bus with their matching uniforms, and 35 players, and Sam Dempster, and four coaches. And so tell me a little bit about your memories of playing Durham College.
They would do all that. They would have all the sparkling uniforms, and I don't think they had flannel blue and white uniforms. They had sparkling uniforms. Everything looked great. And I, just as a sidebar, I was a middle infielder. I played first base. I played first base with a second baseman's glove because we didn't have a budget for a first baseman's glove, and I certainly wasn't going to spend the money on it. I'm sure they had 4 different first baseman's gloves. But yeah, I had no idea there was a rivalry there. And I guess Bill on his podcast mentioned that there was a little history there between different guys and whatnot. So I ended up playing first in the first game in Dundas. I remember this vividly. And just the chirping that was coming out of the dugout, I had no idea what hit me. I was like, it was angry, it was aggressive, it was all this stuff. I was like, dear God, who are these people? So I subsequently learned that there was a bit of a rivalry there. But yeah, it was certainly, I mean, I don't think any game I was in ever got heated in a way that was towards a boiling point, but it was certainly aggressive, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Well, you wouldn't expect it out of I guess maybe if we used the stereotypical version of what people think of the Hammer, or what people think of Oshawa, the Schwa. It might get a little testy, but you wouldn't expect it out of a medically influenced university like McMaster, which is pretty prestigious. And I know Sam Dempster and Ken Babcock were involved with the Durham program, and they run pretty tight ship. So it's kind of funny to hear that it was just this yipping, trash talking festival. But
well, it's funny. I ended up running into a guy who I grew up in Toronto, grew up on the same street as him until I was about 8. So we had to civilize. I figured if benches ever cleared, I'd go find him, and he wouldn't be angry enough to punch me in the head, and I'd survive. So,
well, it's amazing. And then, we'll talk a little bit about, tell me about the types of things you guys had to do to fundraise, right? Like you guys sold T-shirts and keg nights or pub nights and other things like that, right?
You know what's funny? In thinking leading up to this, you and I were at a Jays game a few nights ago, and we were all talking about this. I can remember certain specific things like it was yesterday with definite detail, and then other things I can't recall at all. And that's when I don't recall that much. I don't recall selling shirts. I don't recall keg nights. I'm sure that all existed. I think some of the core guys drove that a little more, and some of the guys who probably lived in Bates, where you could get away with a little more of that, Bates residents, recall that. But I'm sure we did because we had to. I mean, I think, we had to pay for uniforms and things like that and whatnot. So I don't recall a lot of that, but the T-shirts I do recall. But that's about the limit of my memory on those things.
Yeah, it's ironic. I think one of the things is one of the big differences between the two programs, Brock and Mac, is the players at Brock didn't have to pay to play at all.
Yeah.
And but we did have to do a lot of fundraising. So we sold T-shirts, and we had a car raffle and very entry level type things, but hustling all the time from that perspective. And you guys had to cut checks to play from that perspective, I think.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I remember that check coming down from Ottawa for me to play, but coming down from my parents for me to play. But it was. I guess if memory serves, I think we were a club and not a team or something like that, so nothing really got supported. And I mean, I get in a way it's not like you had to rent ice or other things, so it was probably not as I guess you had to pay for umps and things like that, but it wasn't as expensive a situation. The one I remember, and this might be urban myth or it might be the case, and it may have been touched on by other people, but I think we were supposed in '94 we were supposed to play the playoffs in Montreal at the Big O. That was the plan. And I think Bill, the Spaceman Lee, was the commissioner, and we were going to play in Montreal. And then the strike hit, and if what I've been told is correct, they took the field out to run a motocross, to have a BMX night or a motocross night or whatever. And because MLB wasn't playing, they didn't put the field back on, and they weren't willing to spend the effort or the money to put the field back on. So off to Guelph we went for the playoffs. I don't know if that's been touched on other podcasts or not.
No, I don't think that has. But
that was, I believe, that was at least the story I heard, because of course that coincides with the 2 years of the Braves winning the World Series and then the '94 strike.
That's such a letdown, right? If you're if your options are to go play at the Big O in Montreal or go to Guelph and play in that horrendous stadium that they have there,
it was a letdown. It was a letdown. I mean, we might have drawn more than the Expos did at that point too, which would have been interesting to see, because they were pulling at about 1,000 a game.
So, Steve, tell me a little bit. It's one of the more memorable things. You guys jammed into cars, like 6, 7, 8 people into cars. Tell me a little bit about your trip to Montreal and what that was like.
So again, there's another example of details that I know we got in cars. I couldn't tell you who I was in I know I wasn't driving because I didn't have a car. I don't know how we got there. I'm imagining the car was probably not one that was in great condition if it was a 20-year-old university student's car. We got to Montreal. I think we had to win all three. No, I know we had to win all 3 games to overtake Montreal in the standings. And it was right at the end of the season. I think it was the last games of the season. And if we didn't win all 3, we would then be in second place and everything would have been set. So we won the first game, and our player coach was strict about, we're going to have a curfew tonight. And you can imagine how that's landing with a bunch of 21-year-olds who are in Montreal. So we play the doubleheader on Saturday. We win the first game. Everything's tracking okay. And we lost, I believe, a close game in the second game, which meant we were no longer able to catch McGill in the standings. So Jay came into the dugout at the end of the game and said, new rule on curfew. If you're in the lobby when we're leaving for the field, you can play. And so that Sunday was not, I didn't play Sunday. And that was the only time in my life I think I was happy to not step on a baseball field. I think we were all working on about 2 hours of not good sleep. So it was a fun time. Again, it's one of those ones where the only thing I feel about baseball at McMaster that makes me sad is that I got to do it just for 1 year, because those were, in just 3 months, we had so much fun. And the guys who get to do it for 4 or 5 years are incredibly lucky now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the memories occur equally, or if not more, off the field than they do on. And
100%.
You guys can't, as we can't help but say the word Montreal and kind of smile a little bit, like everybody would, from that perspective. It is a unique adult playground is Montreal. But amazing. So, why don't we touch on, like you would have had some exposure to Jason Gwindon at that time. And what did you think of Jay, as a coach and as a guy who had founded the program? Did you have a lot of interaction with him or not a lot?
Yeah, I have 99% great things to say about him. I'll get the one bad thing out of the way. I think at the end of the season, all 4 teams got together and were awarding all Canadian, which is 4 teams, all Canadian, or should have been all Ontario. I guess Quebec was in it, by position. So Billy, runaway at catcher, Steve McGrail at second. They get to first base, and it was not an embarrassment of riches at first base in this league, I don't think, which is where I played. And I think it was the Durham coach said to the group, well, to Jay, your first baseman's pretty good. And Jay told me this afterwards. Jay said, "No offense, that kid can't hit to save his life." So he basically sewered me justifiably. It protected the integrity of the award, but I was ripped off of a all Canadian Coca-Cola T-shirt or whatever Billy got to print campus in. So that was the one time. But he did tell me laughing because that was kind of who Jay was, and everyone says the same things to say. Not only did he get this thing off the ground, which wasn't a monument offer, but he was just such a great guy. He was so much fun to be around. He took it, he did this for all of us to be able to have a chance to do it. And really, in some ways, I would have gotten off the ground eventually, I think, because baseball has become so popular in Canada. But, he's one of the reasons that with, I'm sure, whomever did it in McGill and whoever in Durham and Brock, but he's one of the reasons why everyone got to do this. And he was just a fun guy, a nice guy. He was just a really thoughtful, kind guy. So it was of the people I got to meet through it. It's one of the highlights for me. It was the chance that I got to hang out with him a bit on campus. It's funny enough, my brother, he was done. Jay finished. So I finished the same year as Jay, I think, or Jay was in a house on 97 Sterling Avenue, which was like a golden house to live in. It was steps from the campus, and it was a good house. And my brother, through Jay, inherited that house thanks to Jay, because he sort of knew my brother was looking and said, "Hey, it wasn't your brother?" Because his whole house was moving out. So my brother got to live in that awesome house at 97 Sterling. But anyway, back to Jay. He was just a fantastic guy. Just I still think about him every so often. Always puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, obviously, I think that he's a special light, and important for us to remember that, and given the bizarre, unfortunate circumstances of him passing a couple of years after the program, touring ballparks. At least he was doing what he loved. From that perspective. So, Steve, tell me a little bit about what it was like balancing schoolwork with baseball. Did you find that tough, or did it enhance your academic experience?
That question assumes they were balanced, but I don't think the commitment to base. I hear about kids who are at university sports now. I think the commitment is. It probably was that way for the basketball team, the football team, but for us, because it was kind of loosey goosey, and it wasn't a big season. If I had to, I was trying to figure it out the other day with someone. If I had to guess, it was a 10-game season, 12 games. If you had 3 other opponents, maybe you played each team 4 times. So it wasn't tough, and it was over pretty fast. So I didn't find it to be too much of a challenge because it didn't maybe have the commitment. I think the guys now probably, I'm guessing, are there before school starts and everything else. And that's,
they're closer to a 20-game season. We played 34 at Brock with some exhibition.
Wow.
But we were also playing in the US, right? So a little bit different experience. So, Steve, why don't we then get into some fun subject matter? Everyone likes to talk about what their favorite university hangout was. We've talked a little bit about the famous / infamous Purple Jesus parties at the residence at Mac, but there's been some mention of the downstairs John, and the Rat, and several others. So if you were to rank your top 3 Hamilton-based, go out and tie a good one on,
Well,
what would yours be?
Number 1 would have to be, I think by the time I was playing baseball, it was named Crowbar. And then it became, I think, Jim Bob Ray's. Before that, when it first opened, I think it was called Pipeline. It was kind of near where the new St. Mary's. Because when I first went to Mac, St. Mary's was actually on the edge of Mac's campus, and it moved. But it was part of the reason why it was my favorite place, and my brother's favorite place, was because Jay Brooks of baseball, Mac baseball fame, was a bartender there. So the pours were always favorable when Jay Brooks was behind the bar. So, and he was a super nice guy. So I think I might be the second biggest fan of Jay Brooks and the Groh family behind my brother. But so it was Crowbar. You can never get into the John because the football team, the basketball team, I guess once Billy was involved, we probably got through lines. I also like downtown. There was a bar called Fever that was fun to go to. In Hess Village, I don't think it was like it is now, but it had Amigos and the Gown and Gavel and a few others.
It's amazing. Well, it's a different experience now. When your kids go off to university, they don't party the same way as we did back in the day. They don't have that rotation. We always had Wednesday through Saturday
Yeah.
rotation. And,
Yeah.
if you got really decrepit, you'd go out Tuesday and Sunday night too. But
Yeah. Yeah.
typically Sundays were parked on a couch watching football, nursing a
Licking your
hangover.
wounds. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, as 94 is obviously your last year at school because you're graduating. Mm-hmm. And so tell me a little bit about graduation and what, leads into the decision to go to Korea to teach English.
Well, I guess part of it is having a geography and history degree with no aspirations of doing anything related to geography and history. So I finished, in whatever it was, April or middle of April, end of April, whenever exams ended. Stayed on in Hamilton for the summer. A bunch of friends were staying on. So did installation and maintenance of above ground pools and a few other sort of things. And then moved back to Ottawa to my parents' place. And then I just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was still pretty young and somehow came across, as sad as this is to say, it's pre-internet days really, or the internet was in its infancy. So I think I saw an ad in the paper to teach English in Korea. And so again, sad is it to say, I faxed my resume over to English Institute in Seoul. And the next day had a job offer. And so decided to think about that for a bit and decided to head over there. And and from there I just had 2 years of living in Asia, doing different things, seeing different things, traveling a fair bit, and then kind of came to the realization that you can't do that forever, and came back and, as I said, sort of stumbled into advertising and got an entry-level position in Toronto, and 24 years later, here we are.
Yeah. Was it a big
culture? When I was in South Korea, it's funny because, again, sort of pre-internet days, I remember getting someone mailing me the newspaper clipping of Mac winning. I don't know if that was 97, 96.
Yeah, 97.
I think it was, I've always said them winning right after I left was probably addition by subtraction, but it made me, I was happy for the few guys I still knew. I think Rob Pino was on that team. Billy was on that team. A few others. Most of the guys had moved on because, when we started in 94, not everyone was a first year for sure. And, but it made me a little homesick, but very happy for the guys that I wasn't able to be a part of that. But
yeah, so tell me a little bit about Korea. Like, this would be interesting. Was language a struggle and getting around a struggle? And I think most people would be, there's the typical things, right? Like, was there big changes in your diet? Or was food different? What did you notice about Korea?
It's funny, the culture. So I was there for 18 months, 16 months before I came home. So the culture shock, and then I went back, but I came home for a month. But the culture shock coming home was almost crazier than the culture shock going there, because I think I had prepared myself so much going over there. This is going to be crazy. It's going to be different. And when I came home, you sort of living a certain way for so long, it felt, certain things felt weird back here. But I don't speak Korean well. I speak it well enough to impress a Korean person because over there, most Westerners don't, I should say most, a lot of Westerners don't make an effort to learn the language. So I learned the basics of, can you turn right at this street, please, to a cab driver, or can I have this, please, or thank you for giving me that. And you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at how excited people get for just that little bit of an effort. But they love baseball over there, so that was nice. I got to, I used to head to so I lived in Seoul, which is a giant city, and I lived there at the very start of 96, I think it was 95. 96, and I think it's changed a great deal now, but even then it was pretty modern city, and so English was broken. A lot of university students spoke English pretty well, and then even other people were able to speak limited English. So between hand gestures and my thank you and can I have a beer please level of Korean and other people their English, we managed to get by. The funny part was you'd get approached on the subway. Oftentimes, even though Seoul was a big city at the time, there weren't a lot of foreigners there, so you'd sort of be the only Anglo person on a subway, and you'd often get approached for English practice. So people would just introduce themselves and talk to you so they could work on their English, which was nice. But at the end of a day of teaching English, sometimes you're like, I just want to stare straight ahead and not do this. But but yeah, it was a really fun time. And as I said, I got to travel. I went to the '98 Olympics where I was at the game where Mark Crawford didn't put Gretzky in the shootout. I got to Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, lots of places. So it was an enjoyable time. But as I said, at some point I thought I could probably easily do this forever and wake up one day and be the age I am now, just still doing that. So I had to pull the chute and come back to reality.
Well, it sounds like it was an amazing experience, and I'm sure that you have that burnt in your mind. Gretzky sitting there on the bench with his head kind of hung low there. You know, it's
Dominic Hasek breakdancing and stopping every feasible or possible angle dot. Yes, it burnt into my brain.
So you come back, and do you move back to Ottawa, or do you, at that point, are you looking to do something different?
Yeah, I came back in April, and I think I spent the summer in Ottawa doing just jobs here and there and whatnot. And then in November, I moved to Toronto, so that would have been November of '98. And by, I called a friend who's my Mac roommate to see what he was doing that weekend, and his then girlfriend, eventual wife, who worked in advertising, said, we're looking and whatnot. And so I applied for a job, an entry-level job as an account coordinator at a company called, an agency called McLaren McCann, and was lucky enough to get it. And since then I've sort of stayed in advertising more or less. So it's one of those careers where you could go to college and get a specialized degree. I didn't have that, so I had a bit of catch up there. But with my university degree, I was able to. I guess that proves that I had some level of competence in time management and things like that. So I was able to catch on there. And as I said, it's been 25 years now.
Yeah, and the initial entry into advertising, is always long hours and low pay, and but there's great benefits to it, perks, and you get to go to things. There's always, at that time, there were mixers, there were lots of these kinds of things. Tell me a little bit about your first couple of years in the advertising game, because you'd be right in the middle of a pretty important part of the city when you think of the number of people who are in the big five advertising agencies, and just in general, it's a pretty big employment sector in Toronto. Or it was, for sure, when you started. Yeah,
it was almost, I always likened it. I mean, I guess teaching English was, felt like a bit of an extension of university, in so much as young people hanging out and we'd live 2 or 3 to an apartment, and young people hanging out and doing young people things. And then I moved back to Toronto, and I ended up in an industry that still is quite young, but back then was very young people focused. And as you said, crazy hours with not great pay, but lots of perks, tickets to Leaf game. I don't know if a ticket to a Leaf game back then was a perk, but tickets to Leaf games, concerts, events and whatnot. And so, yeah, it was a fun time that you do work hard, but you certainly, again, my mom used to call me Peter Pan. Maybe it was just an inability to want to grow up, that I'd find all these things where you could still kind of behave like you were 19 or 20 years old. But yeah, it was a blast, and I think you were in the industry on the media side at that time, were you?
Yeah.
It's have even more perks than I would on the media side.
Yeah, no, I can talk a little bit about and primarily in broadcast. So I started on the broadcast side, and so broadcast was kind of the even more glamorous at that time part of ad sales. So we would go to something called the BES Christmas party. And I can remember all kinds of debauchery happening there. You never had an empty glass, let's put it that way. And you would see all kinds of craziness, because it was a great, a couple thousand people that would get together from the advertising industry and party at Christmas. And it's a shame that, I think one of the casualties of really the provider side, so I don't mind saying this, but like the big media companies have gotten so tight with everything because they're struggling to turn over enough profit. They don't support things like the BES anymore. There's not the expense on making the industry about the people. It's more about the automation and the everything that you can save and automate and turn into a
Mm-hmm.
transaction as opposed to a relationship as being that's supported, but they don't support the relational side of things, which is
Yeah.
to the detriment of the industry to a certain extent. It's killed some of the creativity, and ideas are harder to come by because there's less people in it. Less experience. Experience is not as valued as it used to be. So
Yeah.
we'll touch on that in a little bit. Let's shift gears here, and in the midst of partying in Toronto and living the life of Leaf games and comp tickets to things. Tell me about how you come across starting a family and these kinds of things. Where does that enter into the mix?
Yeah, well, again, I sort of probably was delaying wanting to grow up. I met my wife when we met through friends when we were about, when I was 31, 32, and lived together for a while. And then got married, had a boy, and then another boy, and sort of, well, I mean, I guess we settled down, or I settled down somewhere in there. I certainly got my fill of, as you said, free concerts and free Leaf games and whatnot. But one of the last of my friends to get married, and then we said, we as I said, we had two boys, and now shockingly, one just turned 14 the other day, and the other one's 16. So stay off the roads, I would suggest, if you're ever in the West End of there's
well, here's a good question for you.
Who doesn't know how to drive, but yeah.
Here's a good question for you. Who's harder on the boys, you or your wife?
I'd say they'd say I'm the bigger. They get away. Well, I'd say they'd say I'm the bigger yeller, and sometimes I say to them, "Is this yelling to you? Because this doesn't feel like yelling to me." But they'd say I'm probably tougher that way. So I'd probably be the disciplinarian. But I'm also the guy. I kind of get lucky because they like sports so much that I'm often the guy taking them all over. I mean, Emily, my wife, drives them a lot of places too, but I'm the one coaching and doing stuff like that. So with that comes me being the guy who gives them crap. I have a very competitive 14-year-old who I sometimes have to rein in, and so he's more strict than my wife is on baseball diamond or the basketball court for sure.
Well, it's interesting, given that you come from a competitive strain. Do you and I think it's quite common because as you know, Bill Newton, who is maybe one of the most competitive people I've ever met in my life. Mm-hmm. But when he and I would watch his daughter and my daughter on the same defense pair in a very high level hockey team, super laid back. It's just very chill and not really getting on the ref's case or anything like that. And like in hockey in particular, there'd be a throng of hockey parents that would be poster children for these people should be banned from arenas because they're screaming at the ref, they're screaming at the other team. Did you find that you're very laid back as a coach and a parent, or is it because you're coaching, there's a little more fire in the mix there?
I would say it's an interesting question. I have a couple points to that. I think Trevor Lawson, who, as you know, whose son is this, he's going down to the States for a baseball scholarship, is, according to my son's friends who play baseball, is the thing. I was talking to him about it, and he was like, 2 or 3 years ago, we had no idea, and here we are. Which to me, and Trevor Lawson was an amazing baseball player, or maybe still is, although he's pretty old. But he, I'm
sure he appreciates you outing him as old.
Yeah, well, we're the same vintage, so he really was an amazing baseball player. But he is a very down to earth guy, so it doesn't surprise me that he said that. But I do find, in my experience, especially in basketball, I've often said to my brother, that lunatic yelling in the stands, I want to walk over, hand him a basketball, and say, go shoot one free throw. And I can almost guarantee you it's going to look like garbage. Because I feel, in my experience through sports, I feel like the people who played at some level, decent level or above, and I would say what we did in university was a decent level. It wasn't some insane level. But people who played at a decent level above and played on teams just don't seem to, like, I'm sure there's exceptions to this rule, but they just don't seem to get as wrapped up in the stupidity of hockey arena yelling I've seen some stuff on basketball courts that's just mind blowing. And it just seems to me, it seems to me almost uniformly, those would be the people who couldn't dribble the ball between their legs, but they're screaming at the referee about a travel call, or in baseball you see a little bit of that as well, and you think, I bet you couldn't make a throw from third to first base. I find that it's funny. I've never seen Bill with his son, with JD, who plays in the OHL. I've never seen him at a game with him, but it's funny you say that about his daughter and your daughter. It doesn't surprise me that he carries himself that way, because I think most people just realize there's no point in getting that way when you're sitting in the stands.
No, you play 1,000 games in your career, and I think you kind of know the track that they're on. They're probably on their road to playing close to 1,000 games in their lives, competitive games. And when you do that, you see it all, you do it all. You kind of understand that, the exceptions stand out more than the rule, but the reality is we don't want our kids to be part of the exception. Like, I was part of some kick-ass baseball brawls, but does that mean I want to see my kid out there in a hockey brawl or in a soccer brawl? No, not at all, right?
Yeah.
Just different time a little bit too, and it was a little more respectful, and
I think probably now people have, I think people, at least my experience is more contained to really basketball, but also a little baseball. I think people just have this crazy expectations of thinking, well, I'm not saying NBA, but maybe D1, and you think, but even that's crazy. Like, that's crazy to think that that's a possibility. And if it does happen, it's not going to happen because you're screaming from the stands. It's going to happen for a million other reasons.
I say to everybody that only 6% of rep athletes, even at the highest level, go on to play varsity, and it's then a smaller percentage that go on to play some sort of pro experience. So it's, when you think of that in terms of a roster of 12 people, that's one out of your team that's going to go play. Even at an elite level, like, it's hard to play varsity. So very interesting to hear that. Steve, let's pivot a little bit on advice you would give people, because you're a guy that's worked his way up, right? You worked your way up in the advertising world, and that takes perseverance and tenacity. And we all get asked quite frequently about what it is when we look backwards at the generations that are following us, and we have millennial thinking, and we have Gen Z, and we have some of these things. And there's some frustration with that group, because they feel that, that everything needs to come right away. But I think one of the big lessons that we can turn to these folks return to them, is a sense of perspective and patience. But, what advice would you give to someone that's in the advertising business in terms of, sticking to it and thriving in an industry that's pretty rough right now? It's been under duress since about 2009, maybe a little bit before that, but it really has been shrinking since then.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. I think one thing, and it's funny because I do find you can often tell the people who've done team focused things growing up when you work with them, and whether it's sports or other things. I think one of the benefits of doing team focused things is learning to be able to work as a team, not just be open to ideas, be willing to think that your idea is the right one, but be convinced otherwise. I think having an openness in the advertising world is something that people, as they're going up, changing your mind can be seen as weakness. I think it's important to be open-minded and be willing to listen to others, and not necessarily because you're the boss, or, I've some of the people on my team who are less experienced than I am come up with really smart things I wouldn't have come up with. Well, let's go with that in that case. I think it's important to be open-minded. And as I said, I think part of that comes from playing team sports and experiencing having to work together and be open to different things. I would say one of my biggest stressors to people is to be able to take a step back and not panic, because I think in this day and age where things are run so thin and so fast, and I think more in your world probably than in mine, media got squeezed, and so you have people working across all these different accounts, and really, you get these manic kind of hectic moments where people lose their heads, and I think an ability to step back and assess and come at it with a calm mind is important. But overall, I'd say you're probably, if you're starting out in this industry, you're probably going to want to figure out whether or not you love it or not. And it's not, like anything you love, it's not always going to be roses. There's going to be bad parts, but at your core, do you enjoy the things in media that you are going to have to do? Do you enjoy the things in advertising that you're doing now and that you can see you'll have to do down the road? Because it is a stressful and a hectic industry, and if you don't have a passion for it on some level, that it's going to be hard to convince yourself to stay in it. And it's not for everyone. And I'm sure you'd say the same, Mike, that media is not for everyone. It takes a certain type of personality, I think. Probably in your world, certainly in mine, you have to have a thick skin. You have to be able to be willing to roll with the punches, and not everyone's that way. And that's fine, but you do need to figure out whether or not you're going to be able to do that long term.
Yeah, I think
you end up with no hair like you, or losing from pulling.
I like to tell everybody that it is exactly like the show Mad Men. We all have big, glass bowls full of cognac on our desk, but the reality is it's. Initially, at least when you first get started, it's a lot more numbers based than people think. You're doing a lot of reconciliation and number tumbling and learning the science of media before you get into the art of media. But there's the art of media comes in time as you learn the science of it. You need to have that fundamental, and then it's fun and creativity. And, we have to be more supportive of creative thinkers having a home. And to me, the industry really needs to encourage creative people to stay in it, because they tend to flow where the money goes. And
I think it burns people out too, right?
Yeah. And people go right now are chasing the easy dollar that's there with AI and these kinds of things. And, the reality is to be impactful in a world that has more advertising in it now than it ever has. We need people who can generate a great idea. And, I think that's, a fundamental that I give everyone, that young people that approach me all the time about it. And I'll just say, look, understand that no one signed up in advertising to balance out a post on a television campaign. We all got there because we wanted to create the next great, where's the beef commercial. But, you've got to put in your time and, understand that it's like anything. It's going to take work and it's going to take time, and it's not always going to be glamorous. And then you're going to eventually scale to that plateau where you're able to spend more time on the fun part of it. And then ironically, if you're really good at that part, they'll promote you back into the business end, and you'll end up going back to where you started, and you're doing things like balancing head count and profit and loss at the end of the day. But
P&Ls and everything. It's interesting. Someone a long time ago said to me, you start out more doing than thinking, and then as you go along, it becomes more thinking and less doing. And I think sometimes people come into it and they want to immediately they have an idea that they'll be sitting in the meeting pointing out how a script can get better or how an execution could improve. And it takes time to learn those. The other people in the room have been doing those things for 10 years or are thinking about what clients are thinking about or other things. There's more to it than just, it's not a marketing class project anymore. So I think I've found that, and it did for me too. It comes as a shock when you walk in and you put forward a point of view, and it's not as maybe informed as you think. Unfortunately, the first time I did it, a guy named Doug Archer was the one I did it to, and a hallelujah that I did it to Doug Archer, because he was a very patient, very kind person. There were other people I later learned, had I tried providing my point of view early on in my career, they might have reacted a little different than Doug did, which was to take me aside and explain why maybe it wasn't my place to necessarily be, and he was right, my place to be doing that at that time. But it's funny because I think, as you get into advertising, it's probably the same in media. You don't know. It's the part I found, having a geography and history degree, you come out of school and you don't, the lawyers probably know what they want to be lawyers, or the doctors know what they want to be doctors. And there's other things, that physio or whatever, that makes sense. But so a lot of people come out and you don't know what's out there necessarily, and you don't know what would appeal to you or how it's going to work. So it's interesting when, at least I found it interesting when you first came out. I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think I fell in love with it right away. And I say this, it's because in my first 6 months in the media side, I got to freeze a coworker alive in a block of ice for charity. And
Perfect.
his wife still doesn't talk to me about it. It was called Frozen Alive, and I did that with Chorus London. And
That's
the poor,
awesome.
it was supposed to, they sent me a fax because that's how far back we're going. They didn't have
Yeah.
an email attachment, and it looked like an ice hotel on the fax. So I went into a meeting. I'm like, yeah, it's fine, it's fine. And then when the thing showed up from Kentucky, because it had to come from Kentucky, it was an ice crypt. It was like a coffin, and he had very little, like he was banging his head on the ice, and he was sealed in there, and they blew in some hot air, but he was on camera for 48 hours. And if he had to go to the washroom, he had to do it in a bag on camera. And we had to pull him out early because he got claustrophobic because he was in a mall parking lot in an ice coffin. Yeah. And somehow this was a great idea for the United Way of St. Thomas, but that started my career, and I haven't stopped since. But we all have that one great campaign. What would yours be? Do you got one that you kind of hang your hat on and think?
There's always, I worry with this one because there's all, what is it? Success has a million fathers and failure's an orphan. I was early stages for maybe the first 9 months of strategic and creative development involved with Sick Kids Versus, which would be one that is a campaign that's pretty well known and very successful. And as I said, it was the early stages. The other people like Laurie Davison, Kate Torrance at Sick Kids, and Craig McIntosh and James Zentel at Cassette were far more instrumental than I was, and Jay Chaney at Cassette, who's a baseball guy, were far more instrumental than I was by a mile on that. But I was lucky enough to be in that at the start. And obviously it's great work, but it's also for an amazing cause. I've been lucky enough that my kids haven't spent any meaningful time there, but I did with one of my numerous concussions. And I think, most people have some sort of link to Sick Kids, and it was nice to, you're selling chocolate bars or cars or whatever else. It was nice to work on something that, not that those aren't important, but it was nice to work on something that was to build a new Sick Kids. So.
Yeah, we do get
some exposure. I'm not claiming I came up with the idea or whatever else. I want everyone going, researching my name and calling me out.
Yeah, you do. It's a pretty good referral, Steve. I think at the end of the day, you've got a style that'll work with most clients, particularly coming out of COVID, where there's a great amount of trepidation about the stuff they tried before COVID doesn't work the same as it did before. Even digital, where it's tended to be, mad rush to get into the digital space. It's not generating the same results with the conversion to the Google conversion on analytics. So there's a lot of confused clients out there, and just to match you with campaign stories, my favorite campaign is one that we ran not even 2 years ago for Ford Motor Company. And we integrate them into professional bull riding. That's their largest single integration in the country. And they wanted to show that the F-150 had an onboard generator, so you could plug tools into it and all that kind of stuff, because they're after contractors and guys that, use trucks for multifaceted type of operation. And so I came up with this cockamamie idea of building a merchandise cannon that you could plug into the Ford, and it would power it up, and you would shoot T-shirts into the crowd at Ford at bull riding events, and they'd show it on TV. Now I can finally reveal this, right? That was nominated for an award, that one. But the truth is, only the lighting in the platform was all an optical illusion, because a T-shirt cannon actually uses compressed gas to shoot T-shirts into a crowd, and the rest was a big optical illusion.
Didn't require a plug.
So I kind of feel a little bit like Penn and Teller now, pulling back the curtain on what was my big shining moment there. But
awesome. Those things are dangerous. I've seen those things take people down at Raptor games. So those things, you got to be careful with those T-shirt guns.
Yeah, no, it looked great. It's just it was a complete manufactured element there. So, but it gets the point across, I guess. And but it's a fun business, and in the early stages of your boys starting to kind of gravitate towards things, Do you see either of them going into the advertising business, or they're going to go in completely different
I
directions?
always say I hope they've seen me cry at home enough to never want to go into advertising. I don't know. You know what? I don't know. I mean, I don't. The funny thing is, by the time they're out of school, who knows what advertising will look like, too, right? And the older guy seems to be interested in some sort of business degree or going to school for business. So, and the younger guy is just in grade 8. So, um, we're just trying to keep him keep him away from a criminal record. So, another petty, what was it? Petty criminal, another petty criminal grow. But
Hopefully,
uh,
his name's not Wayne. You know.
no, it's not. It's not. Fortunately, it's not.
um, so, Steve, let me ask you. Again, we'll do a little change of pace here.
Yep.
A lot of guys will have not seen you in 30 years, and some of them you stay in touch with. Who are the guys that you stayed in touch with from your McMaster playing days? And I would have seen a few of them, obviously.
Yeah, Billy. Billy was really the main one. I've been more recently over the past couple of years because of some of the work you've been doing to get us all together. I've been on, Facebook emails with Steve Groh, who's an awesome guy. Saw Shane Tui the other night. Saw Trevor. Those are the main guys. Jay Brooks, I saw, and last I heard, he lives in Dubai. He's a pilot, and ran into him at a golf course when I had finished a round, and he happened to be there for a wedding randomly, and that would have been probably 15, 20 years ago, or not, about 15 years ago. So I'm friends with him on Facebook, but there hasn't been a lot. And what I love about what you're doing and what Billy's trying to get off the ground is it's given me a chance to, we all have busy lives. We have a million things to do. We all live in different places, but it's given me a chance to see guys who I really enjoyed being around and see more of them and sort of relive that stuff. I think you get to a point when your kids are young, you're just in the thick of it. You're running nonstop. And I still do a fair bit of that, but it's less so now. You don't have to be around them all the time. In fact, they don't want to be around you all the time. So a little more free time comes available, and it's great. I just am thrilled that I've had a chance to see some of these guys again.
That's great, Steve. Listen, one other thing, because we don't have a lot, it's funny, between Brock and McMaster, there's not a lot of people that live in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And, I don't think people outside of the city really give it a horrific rap because of the traffic that they've got to battle to get in. And truthfully, having been a commuter for, oh God, I got to be getting close to 20 years of commuting at a certain point. It is horrendous. And it poisons your ability to really appreciate the city. But tell me a little bit about what your experience is living in the city. I've got a whopping 4 months in, and I've really come to appreciate that Toronto is a city of neighborhoods, and within those neighborhoods, it's really quite special. But tell me a little bit about what life is like in Toronto for the benefit of those who live outside.
Yeah, I mean, the traffic thing is and it's only getting worse with the closed lanes on the Gardiner for what I understand to be the next 3 years. So that may be my tipping point. Who knows? I may become Michael Douglas and falling down and on one of my commutes in. But I love it for the energy of the city. I love it. There's concerts. There's whether it's music, comedy, whatever. There's sporting events. There's all those things. I do find now it's become more challenging to get down to a Raptors game. Feels like a bigger task than it used to because I think I've become an old man. But or go to a Leafs game or a Jays game. But I love all that the city has to offer. I love what it has to offer for my kids. We live in the West End, just on the edge of Toronto, or in Etobicoke, and for them, I'm not overly concerned about them in a big city, but they have the aspects of that. They add all the neat things about a big city as well. I will say, having just come from Thorold, Ontario, watching my older guy play basketball at the Canada Games building they have there, that has this amazing indoor lacrosse arena, has 4 basketball courts, that has a track above it to run around, and is just beach volleyball outside is gorgeous. And a couple of the Toronto kids, I was driving them home, they're like, maybe living out here would be good. So it's not that I don't see the benefits of living in other places. I think there's trade-offs with each, but Yeah, it's I love it. I grew up, as I mentioned at the start, I grew up here until grade 7. I think I've always sort of been Toronto at heart. I'm not sure it's where I'll end up when the kids are done and out of our house, but and who knows when they'll be out of our house, but yeah, it's to me it's a great city. It's a fun city.
Yeah, the facilities in Toronto, other than they leave a little to be desired.
Yeah.
I can remember coming in for the Scarborough hockey tournament with my girls, and
Yeah.
we were at Angela James and Commander Arena and these places, and there's rats, and there's the dressing rooms were made for people from 1950, so everyone over the size 6 feet tall is cramped and gross, but it definitely has some advantages there.
And then you go down to the States for these things, and it's on even different level, obviously, especially the baseball diamonds. The ones here are, where my kid plays, it's serviceable and fine, but it's certainly not on the level. As you get out further, it gets better, and then as you go south of the border, it's then just on a completely different level. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. Do you have some priorities that you and your wife want to tackle when the boys get a little closer to leaving the nest there? Is travel big for you?
Yeah, I think travel's, again, who knows when leaving the nest will be permanent. But I have a feeling we may have a couple boomerangs on our hands, but we'll see. I think travel would be great. I think, as I said, I think both of us feel like maybe Toronto won't be forever for us. I think there's advantages to getting out of the city where things are just a little more, whether it's golf memberships, tennis club membership, whatever is just a little more reasonable. Traffic's a little easier to swallow. That's somewhere down the road. Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how I get kids to 3 basketball games and 2 baseball games in a weekend. But once that all settles, hopefully we'll probably end up somewhere else.
Well, amazing. Listen, and in 6 months' time, we'll be lining up, and the boys will be watching you take a big uppercut swing thanks to your slow pitch. And
no, it's not an uppercut; it's just a badly hitched, broken swing. I've asked Bill if we could use pitching machines, which I got to think none of the pitchers would object to that, given the stage of our arms. But Bill said that we can't use pitching machines, so I plan on replicating my inauspicious university hitting career in September again.
I feel like the walk is going to be the primary mode of offense here, but it's.
Well, the nice thing will be going from a game like my 14-year-olds where there's about 87 stolen bases a game to one where there's none. I'm guessing because I'm certainly not running unless I'm absolutely required to. So.
It's pretty bad when you got to bring the oxygen tank when someone walks to first, right? It's I need it, But
well, maybe we could do a relay or something like that.
Well, we firmly established that the pitcher has to be the cutoff man on throws from third to first. So,
am I hearing of the rumors of no bunts either? That's the only way I used to be able to get even remotely close to getting on.
We're still working on some things. We know that it's going to be wooden bat now, so this has been carried the day. But I think no bunts, and maybe. We'll put pitching inning limits on some of the pitchers, right? Because if you get one that's still active and they go out and they throw 3 or 4 innings, it's going to be very lopsided very quickly. Mm-hmm. We're looking forward to having you, and it'll be tons of fun. And we get to do, like we do in advertising, something for a good cause.
It's amazing.
On the McMaster side, it's a scholarship that supports incoming freshmen for the baseball team, and we'll do the same at Brock. And
that's awesome.
You get to meet Todd, who is his own walking advertisement for tenacity and positive thinking. So, Steve, thank you so much for this. We will definitely head out to a Jays game yet again, and maybe a few other things, and we'll get caught up over a pint.
Maybe they'll score more than 1 run. I will say, if you have a trivia night, I can be the answer to who is what player has 1 career RBI, and that was from being hit by a pitch with the bases loaded. So I have to assume I'm the only one with that. Record.
That's a hard way to make a living, right there.
Well, listen, at the time, I was more than happy to do it. My old coach used to say, take one for Queen and Country. I was more than happy to take one for Queen and Country.
Amazing. Thank you for tonight, Steve, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, I hope to see you soon. Thanks again, Mike.
Okay.
Bye.
the smell